Hello everyone, welcome back to The Captivating Christian. I am your host, Chris T. Ian, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Unlike usual, where we've talked about Christian movies and television, we're going to be trying something a little different today. Instead, we're going to be doing a review of a written piece of media. We're going to be reviewing a novel. Like you'd expect from The Captivating Christian, it is a Christian novel, and in this case, it is part of the Spinechillers series, also known as Spinechillers Mysteries. This particular book series was brought to my attention because of one Spongy 3 Numbers who...
Spongy 3 Numbers.
I'm leaving that in. I'm so leaving that in. Not only did his own review of this, but also referenced me in his review, which is greatly appreciated. I thank you, Spongy. Spinechillers is a series of books that lasted from about 1996 to 1998, and then they stopped doing them. They tried doing a revival in 2010, but that went nowhere, which is why I am now issuing a Change.org petition to bring back the Spinechillers series to libraries and private schools all across the country. This was a series of Christian books by the author Fred E. Katz, which is definitely a real name. It is definitely a real person's name. So are these, by the way. These are obviously real people's names. There's no way those are actually fake. But anyway, enough of that. Let's actually get on with this review of this particular book itself. So the story begins with Kyle, who lives in California, and he lives with his uncle Rex, who is a Hollywood big shot. Clearly, like a lot of these other elitist Hollywood celebrities, he clearly must have connections to Jeffrey Epstein. No, I don't think it was forced at all, Ariel. Anyway, Kyle has a couple of friends. There's Sammy, who's a bit of a prankster, and he's also of Mexican descent. There's Sarah, who enjoys baseball, and there's also Brent, who's small and friendly. Kyle notices something strange going on next to his house, because it seems that there is a carnival that has come to town. Of course, this carnival in question is the titular Dr. Shivers Carnival of Terror. Not to be confused with the Insane Clown Posse's Carnival of Carnage. That is a totally different IP. So from there, we get a series of set pieces where these characters are going from carnival ride to carnival ride, and attraction after attraction that has some kind of spoopy element going on in it. For example, one of the rides is gremlins that shoot at them. Now granted, they only shoot water, but that's still very spoopy. There's also the Fear Us wheel, where they get on it, and once they're up in the air, it stops, and then spiders show up, and then the ride keeps going until they get off of it. And there's also a food area where hot dogs actually bark, and all their food seems to have worms in it, which is definitely not taken from another book series at all. That's totally an original concept. Then once they see it, they just laugh at it and throw it away. There's also a ventriloquist show where the ventriloquist is actually also a dummy. Again, clearly an original concept. This was not taken from anything else, and if anyone says that this was clearly ripped off by something, I'm pretty sure that's fake news. That's false information. There's also a scene in here where they go down a bunch of slides, and the slides have a bunch of slimy, spongy substances, but then they just simply exit the slide once they get to the bottom. There's a part where there's this carnival game where the carnival barker turns out to be a monster, except not really, because then he gives them a mask, and the mask ends up possessing young Sammy and puts him under the control of the titular Dr. Shivers. Now, you're probably wondering, wait, how is this a Christian book? There's not a lot of references to religion in this. Well, that comes up in the next scene to happen, where they end up running into a mummy's tomb attraction, and they get chased by an actual mummy, and they end up stopping the mummy because there's a scene where Sarah grabs a torch, and she says that God gave her the courage and the bravery to take on the mummy. Every so often, there's also references to praying circles and the groups doing group prayers and all that kind of thing. I honestly think that it's a good way to inject some good faith into a mystery horror novel like this. There's also a subplot all throughout this book where they're constantly finding little clues and little marbles that have letters on them that is supposed to spell out some kind of sentence. And that's what gives this book a great sense of mystery and tension. Now, some critics out there might say that, oh, isn't it a little anticlimactic and not very suspenseful to have scary things kind of happen, but then immediately have it that the characters are safe? Well, clearly those people have not read true horror classics like Anyway, as our crew then goes to try and find Sammy, they end up going on this one ride that involves a giant blade swinging at them, and they almost get injured, but thankfully they're okay. Honestly, that scene was probably a little too suspenseful. Honestly, that part of the book probably should have been omitted, because something actually suspenseful happened there. I think that they probably should have toned that down. They should have kept it to something kind of almost scary, but not actually having anything happen, because we don't want too much tension here, okay? We don't want to scare people too much. We don't want to scare people too much in this horror novel. Finally come across Sammy, who is no longer under control, and the area that they're in is in a giant golf course where Kyle gets to demonstrate his golf skills, where he's able to fend off these giant golf balls that could easily crush a person, like a boulder in one of those Indiana Jones films. They end up making a run for it, and then they end up going down one of the holes, and they end up on a tram ride where there is a werewolf, and then the werewolf chases them for a little bit, and then immediately gets off at his stop. See, that's the kind of thing I appreciate more in books like this. We don't want to have things too suspenseful happening. We want to have things that are just kind of a little scary, but not really scary on their own. Because after all, this might be a horror mystery novel, but at the end of the day, we're supposed to be focusing more on the faith element, okay? So after the tram ride, they finally get to the end, and it turns out this book actually has an M. Night Shyamalan style twist, as it turns out that this was actually part of one big movie that Rex was working on. Yes, remember Uncle Rex from the beginning of the book? He wanted everyone to be extras in his film. So what he did was, he decided to pull this elaborate stunt where they have them believe all these crazy mystical things are happening around them. And it turns out that it was all just part of the movie. Now, some might say that's unethical, but I think Rex's response would be your typical, it's just a prank / it's just a social experiment, bro. So overall, Dr. Shiver's Carnival of Terror from the Spinechiller Mysteries / Spinechiller series is a very good entry, if you ask me. It's a very unique original series that appeals to the younger demographic as well as the older demographic, especially for the religious demographic. It's really quite an original concept, the anthology type of series of books with all these different events going on and the mystical horror kind of element to it. I can't really think of a series that does something like this. It's very original, very fresh. I really can't think of a series like it, honestly. And again, I am ashamed that there was no 2010 revival series. We need to make that happen. Alright, well, I think that's the only video I have to do for October. I can't really think of another one I have to... Well, what do you mean, Ariel? What do I have to talk about?
Let's light the fires!
It's a ripoff, and I'm gonna have to watch it. Oh my gosh!